Yasher Koach and Shabbat Shalom. Fred, thank you so much. What thoughtful, complex Torah, and with the essential teaching, without transformation, no transformation, no revelation, the idea that the bushes are on fire everywhere and we just need to turn aside and see. And if we do and allow ourselves to be transformed, we will see what needs to be done. Beautiful. Thank you. It's hard to imagine that you wrote that not, before this week, because it fits so well with the events of the week. So I, as I said a little earlier, wasn't planning to speak today, but feel that I must. I, hearing you teach and speak, Fred, I kind of thought, well, maybe I didn't need to speak, but I'm going to speak really directly to the events of the week and bring some Torah to what we just experienced. So I'll do that now. I felt the need to speak to you this morning, though it was not part of our original plan. I felt the need to speak to you in the week that Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock, John Lewis's pastor, the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Martin Luther King Jr. was baptized, where he gave his first sermon at age 19 and where he served as pastor for the rest of his life. The pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church became the first Black senator from the state of Georgia. I felt the need to speak to you in the week that John Ossoff, John Lewis's intern, became the first Jewish senator from the state of Georgia. In the week when a Black-Jewish alliance in the South won the Senate for the Democrats, making our member, Chuck Schumer, the first Jewish Senate Majority Leader ever, making the first Black Indian woman Vice President, Kamala Harris, the tiebreaker in the Senate, and saving America from the depraved current leadership of the Republican Party. I need to make sure we all know and saw that Ossoff and Warnock campaigned together. They backed each other up, they defended each other against racist and anti-Semitic attacks, and they won together in the state where Stacey Abrams showed us the future of democracy in America. I felt the need to speak to you in the week when white supremacy threw a temper tantrum, in which white supremacy, as it faces an existential threat, tried to prevent the peaceful transfer of power in the United States. It tried to block democracy, as it's been doing effectively for most of our history, because democracy will be the demise of white supremacy in America. And Georgia is the harbinger of that demise. We are going to remember this week for the rest of our lives, and let it be because we saw the harbinger of the demise of white supremacy. Now, while we are shaken by the very real dangers unleashed and on display this week, the 6MWE t-shirts, which stand for 6 million were not enough, the Camp Auschwitz t-shirts, which need no explanation, the gallows with the noose erected near the Capitol, the Confederate flags waved inside the Capitol and hung yesterday on the Museum of Jewish Heritage here in New York, the fact that 45% of Republicans polled said they think that the siege on the Capitol was justified, the fact that the insurrectionists and all of the white nationalists and many of that 45% are armed to the teeth, the facts that are coming out now that there were many off-duty police officers in that crowd and that it seems that they had help from inside, the fact that this has now been done and we have all seen it, making a coup and a violent insurrection something imaginable in this country. The fact that 4 years of the steady dismantling of democracy has taken an immeasurable toll, a toll that we cannot even fully perceive. All of this is actually dangerous. But I want to remind us that all of this is happening the entire last 4 years because we are winning, because the movements for justice, dignity, and equality are winning. And despite the Trump presidency, we are still winning. The Biden-Harris administration will be the most diverse administration in American history. And they cannot stop this forward movement. They cannot. I want to remind us of how well our democracy is holding up against relentless assault. And that is because of grassroots organizers like the Stacey Abramses of the world, the everyday activists like the 10,000 people who participated in Get Organized Brooklyn right with us, let us not forget, and the hundreds of thousands of people who got out the vote, and the movement builders and the guardians of civil society, and because of journalists and fearless truth tellers. In 2016, we knew that this man was a fascist, though we were afraid to use that word for some reason. And we said more polite things like autocrat and authoritarian, but we knew. We were warned by the Masha Gessens and the Timothy Snyders that our democracy was in danger and it could die on his watch. We knew that he would never voluntarily relinquish power. We knew that. This could have been so much worse. We could have not had an election at all this year. That's what I thought. It could have been not fair. He could have won. We could have had an actual coup or an actual civil war. Those things are still, of course, possible. But here we are 11 days before the inauguration. And this was the coup? It was pretty feeble. It was a desecration of our Capitol building and our government and our values. But no one was actually afraid that the insurrectionists would succeed this time. Rabbi Yitz Greenberg teaches that the Jewish people live in a dialectic between the reality and the dream. The dream is the messianic vision, a world of justice, dignity, equality, and harmony for all life. We are to commit ourselves to that dream, to see ourselves as responsible for it, never, ever giving up on it. But we're also never to look away from the reality, even when it is very ugly. In the parsha this week, Moses, as we just learned, sees a bush on fire but not consumed. And he stops and he turns aside to look. And Fred just taught us that there are bushes on fire everywhere. And if we only stop and turn aside to look, we may be transformed. We may experience revelation. Well, Moses turned aside to look. And rabbis often say that that is the act of turning aside was what made the call possible. Well, in Shemot Rabbah 127, the rabbi suggests that the reason God chose Moses to call at the burning bush was because this was not the first time that Moses turned aside to look. Quote, "The Holy Blessed One said, you left aside your business and went to see the sorrow and the burdens of Israel and acted toward them as brothers act." Meaning, when Moses was in Egypt and didn't allow the palace life to prevent him from turning aside and seeing the oppression around him. When at the bush, Moses turned aside to see, quote, "The Holy Blessed One saw Moses, who turned aside to see the burdens of his brothers." It was Moses' willingness to see the suffering and oppression around him in Egypt, the injustice and the hate, that merited him being chosen to lead the people out of Egypt. This week, we saw the reality of white supremacy. We saw a snapshot. We saw the extreme edge of the 74 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump. We saw where we are as a nation. We saw that the palace is on fire. Our society, our world is ablaze with white supremacy. And there's no way to make our democracy whole without looking squarely at it, without turning aside to see again and again. As Rabbi Sharon Brous taught us, we must either remove or pay for the stolen beam that is at the foundation of our house, meaning that the edifice of our society was built on the theft of human lives and freedom. And in the Talmud, the rabbis consider when you find that your house was built on a stolen beam, whether you must take that house apart and remove the beam or whether you can simply pay restitution for the theft. Either way, the white supremacy on display this week was another reminder that there is no way to avoid taking account of all the theft that undergirds our society and the ideology and the systems that have been maintained ever since, from slavery until now. We could look away. We could pretend it's not real. But if we ever want to heal, and if we ever want a whole democracy, we must turn aside from our business and see. This is what it is to be a Jew, to live right inside of all the ugliness of reality, to see it squarely, and also to hold on to the dream. Civil rights elder Vincent Harding described a river that is always flowing from the reality to the dream. The river is sometimes frozen over, he said, and the flow is hidden under the surface. Other times the river is turbulent and rapid, but it is always flowing. The river is inevitable. The river cannot be stopped. We are not the resistance, Michelle Alexander taught us. We are that river. a mixed multitude who, in a few weeks in Torah, will make our way to freedom, linking arms together across all of our differences, moving always toward justice and equality and dignity and harmony for all life, toward freedom. Let us now turn aside to see the reality. Let us not be afraid. Let us hold on to the dream and have trust and faith that it is coming. Let us remember that we are the river, and together we are on our way, flowing there. Shabbat Shalom.
Rabbi Timoner, before we bless the upcoming month of Shabbat, I wonder if there's a prayer for our country that you'd like to offer at this time.
You are so right, Kinder Breitzer. Got carried away in what I was saying, forgot that I was going to offer.
It was the river, it wasn't you.
What's that? It was the river. I'm just flowing. What can I do? Yes, I felt that this morning. We don't usually offer as part of our Torah service a prayer for our country, though that is something that many Jewish communities do. And it seemed that this morning was a time when we should really be offering a prayer for our country. And I'm using the prayer that's in Mishkan Tefillah. I'll just read it to you. And then I'm also putting in some words of a prayer that I wrote with Rabbi Colin in November, right before the election, praying for safety. Thus says Adonai, this is what I desire, to unlock the fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of lawlessness, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. Share your bread with the hungry and take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, give clothing and do not ignore your own kin. If you banish the yoke from your midst, the menacing hand, the evil speech, if you offer compassion to the hungry and satisfy the famished creature, then your light shall shine in the darkness. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. God of the fearful and the anxious, God who accompanies our ancestors to freedom, God who amplifies the voices of the oppressed and the poor, God who values every human life with loving kindness, guard our streets from violence. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we serve you. Heal the wounds and divisions in our land so that we can begin the work of building our future together. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. And we say together, Amen.
Amen.